Welcome to the Big Mike Fun Podcast, where you'll learn about advanced wealth building strategies from real estate investing to creating massive ROI and secured retirement profits. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, grab a notepad, and lean in, because Big Mike has got the mic, starting now.
Welcome to the Big Mike Fun Podcast. I'm the Big Mike Zlotnick, and today it is my pleasure and a privilege to welcome Trey Taylor. Hi, Trey.
Mike, good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Great to see you too. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Trey is what they used to call an officer and a gentleman. I met him in person. I was really impressed, and I read his book. He's got an awesome book, and we're going to talk about this book. This is an incredibly powerful book, and the book is called "A CEO Only Does Three Things," and it's such a powerful concept that I am personally using the book. I am personally trying to focus on those three things because those are the most important things, and everything else, as much as it is fun and interesting and exciting to do or not, shouldn't be CEO's job. So let's dive into this. So before we do that, tell the audience a little bit about you. Where do you live? Family, wife, kid, cats, pets, whatever works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we live about 3 hours south of Atlanta, and it's our hometown for many generations in the family. One of the jobs that I have is to run the family business inside of a family office. And so we've decided to do that here. Great place to raise kids. And Mike, you will laugh at me when I tell you this, but we have just found out that we're expecting a surprise third baby. And so we thought we were finished. Thank you, but we have work yet to do. So we're really excited about that.
That's very exciting. It's kids are a blessing and a joy, and it's I have, as I said, I have 4 kids, and I call it 4 monkeys and a cat. So you have 3 monkeys now. I don't know if you got any cats, but if you have a I guess kind of family farm, I'm sure you got other animals.
Yeah, we got people running all over the place and animals and all that kind of thing. So super excited to welcome that child. We just found out, so we're super early. So it'll be November this year.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Let's dive into the book, and let's dive into some of the key questions. And before we forget, one of the most important questions, what's the difference between a good CEO and a great CEO? We answer that last or a little bit later, but let's start with what are the 3 things or the only things that CEOs should do?
Yeah, so it's my contention that CEOs are very busy doing things that other people are probably better at doing in the first place. And so doing work where you're not called to do it takes a sort of an emotional and psychological investment. And if you do too much of that, then you get into a stage where you're burning some internal energy on things that are not as important as the things you should be doing. And so when I go through that and I think about it in my own career and in the career of those that I coach and my clients that retain me on a consulting basis, we see that the 3 things that CEOs should be doing, and really only doing, are culture, people, and numbers. So the culture is that ethical environment and sort of what we live in, we swim in, we work in. It's those unspoken rules largely that govern how we treat each other in the workplace. And, what we find is that CEOs that focus on building and grooming and keeping a very healthy culture together don't have the burnout problems. They don't have a lot of the standard business challenges that other CEOs who prefer not to focus on the culture and who prefer to focus way more on the details and the daily to-do list items seem to have. So culture is the most addressable thing right there. Number 2 is people. A CEO, a good CEO, a great CEO has to be interested in the people that are around him. He has to understand those people at a deep psychological level, and he has to, manage people, which is a very hard thing to do. If he has the culture right, he should be attracting the right kind of people to work in the culture. If that's the case, then the numbers, the third thing, should be relatively easy. Not that it isn't complicated, but an easy result to pull out of those people. And so that's what we think the three things are: culture, people, and numbers.
These are very powerful concepts, and I happen to agree 100%. And culture means many different things to different people. But it's interesting that some folks, probably culture includes a set of fundamental core values, obviously, and then could also means where the company is going directionally, sort of a little bit of a vision and mission, right? All that
Correct.
falls under the culture. So
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
Any quick comments on sort of the depth of the culture? Because culture is such a broad word that it may not be clear, but dissect a little bit of that, sort of the core values, the mission, the vision, kind of setting the direction. Are all those things included?
Absolutely. All those things are constituent parts of the culture. The most helpful concept that I've come across that really gets it across to people is, if you trace the Latin root of the word culture, it shares a cognate with the word that we use cultivate today. So if you cultivate a garden today, that means you plant the things that you want to have coming out of the garden. But it also means that you pull the things that are bad for those good things out of the garden. And it is this full-time mentality that you have to keep in. You have to keep that in focus, that this is the way that I want the world to look. And I can impact these 15 or 100 people, or however big your company is, by having these core values planted in the ground, that I defend against things that are bad for them, and that I nourish with things that I know are good for them. That's really the job of culture. And it sounds a little bit, up in the sky and that sort of thing. But when you're doing culture work, you know it, and you can see the benefit coming out of it all the time. Our first engagement is always a long discussion about what the value system is, not what you want it to be, but what it really is, and how it represents the way that you see the world and you think the world should be working. And it is often very interesting, because I send the CEO back into his organization to observe not what he wants to be true, but what is true. And very often CEOs come back with their head in their hands saying, I can't believe this is the way that we're choosing to do business. And so we do a lot of work at that point.
That's very powerful. So the culture is really important, what you said. I just wanted to reiterate it what it is versus what you want it to be. And perhaps you could move the culture in a direction where you want it to be as a CEO. But you have to be a realist and recognize what the culture is today. If the culture is not ideal, that you have to work on the culture and get it to be where ideally your vision of the culture is.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, you want your core values to be aspirational to some extent, but you do want them to represent things that you are doing on a daily basis, because your culture shows up in the behaviors of your people. That's how you know what the culture is. It isn't what you engrave on the wall. Enron had a great mission statement and cultural articulation in gold letters in marble in their New York offices, beautiful. But they didn't live those 8 feet away in the next conference room. They didn't show up. Those values did not show up in the behaviors of their people. And that's how you know that you're getting it right, when you see people acting in the way that you think the world should act. But on the whole, not just your company, but on the whole, that's when you know you're getting it right.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And you started this conversation that it starts with culture, and you bring in people that fit into the culture. If they don't fit, it's almost like bringing an expert into the business with a certain set of skills is secondary to bringing the person with the right culture. If they don't have the right culture, Absolutely. Regardless of their technical skills, you probably don't want to bring them on board, because they'll be right. Culturally mismatched.
Yeah, for my own organization, we have 4 different interviews. The first one's a culture interview, and the candidate speaks very little, because she's not going to tell me, or he's not going to tell me anything about my culture. I want to tell that person, this is the culture that you're about to walk into. And if you don't share these values, if you don't share these behaviors, if you don't exhibit this in your daily life unconsciously, you're not going to fit here. I had an interview this morning The lady showed up 7 minutes late, offered no apology or explanation whatsoever, was dressed probably not appropriately for the position, and spent the first 35 minutes of the interview telling me why her employer should not have fired her. So we saw a lot in those behaviors that said that she wasn't a fit. Now, here's the challenge. Do I tell her, or do I tell her, oh, we'll follow up later? I told her. I said, look, I think you're probably a very capable person in your job. I think you just, went through a situation that was mentally hard for you to be let go from a position. We kind of have all maybe been there in our careers, but you're not going to be a cultural fit for what we're trying to do up here. And that's no slam on you whatsoever, but the values and the way that we do things are very different than the way I think you've been trained to do them. And so rather than go down the whole process of all the other interviews, I think it's better if we just wish you well and say, can I help you find a job somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a great feedback item. I love this. This is, you don't want to put lipstick on something and just delay the inevitable. You're better off just tell them straight up. Not a good fit. We are different. We're not saying anything is wrong with what you do, but it just doesn't fit our culture. And let's save you the time and save us the time and the energy. And yes, there's probably a better place for you to look for the next opportunity. So that makes total sense. Now let's continue from the back to the people. So one thing I learned, again, outside of reading your book, but this is again years worth of management and leadership training. One thing I learned is CEOs, yes, they manage, but they also lead, and the leadership is more important than management, at least for a CEO role. So, how do you see CEOs, or what is your ideal CEO? What do? They spend a lot of time developing other people. And this is what I understood as a CEO. You have to spend a good amount of your time developing other people and making sure that they feel happy, they feel engaged, they feel growing, and this is more important than managing them. Leading them and ensuring that they feel empowered and successful is far more valuable than a great set of management skills. So what is, just dissect this a little bit, what the book teaches.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I think the key is that the CEO, when they are choosing the people, are going to make the biggest impact that they're ever going to make on the organization. The people who are actually tasked with doing the work, to showing up every day, to doing the sales, or to doing the the customer service and that sort of thing. Those are the people that are going to impact the life of the business the most. And so retaining for the CEO a large portion of time in the interview process is very important. And I think that the CEO should retain the final word on who we hire and not. That's not to say that you don't get input from other people in the company. Of course you should. If you have an HR staff and they have certain opinions and those kinds of things, those should be respected. I happen to think that if the CEO is the last word in the interview, they should be going along with what the team says most often, and really be the brakes on the process, really be the person that says, well, you all love this person, but I don't feel like they're a cultural fit for these reasons. Let's discuss. So that is a huge part of what the CEO should be doing. Most CEOs are not doing the interviewing. Most CEOs are doing a rubber stamp interview at the last interview and say, yeah, okay, this person looks good. I trust you guys. Let's go forward with it. But I think the more you inform the interviewing, the recruiting process with your culture and your values, the better results that you're going to get long term. Secondly, the CEO has a lot of responsibility for retention. People want to feel respected, appreciated, and praised in their role. And that really carries the greatest weight when it comes from the highest point in the organization. So there isn't a year that goes by, and I have a very small organization, that I don't handwrite about 500 cards. Thank you cards, cards that say you're doing a great job, cards that say you missed this account, but you'll get the next one, those kinds of things. Cards that go to the children of people that work with me that says, your dad is a great resource for our business. Thank you so much for sharing him with us. Your dad just received this award, and you should know what that means and why he received it. Those kinds of things. That is a large portion of a working day. You can't cheat it. You can't fake it. People know authenticity when they see it. And that's a big part of why people stay in organizations, because they feel respected and appreciated by those who know how to evaluate performance.
Yeah, that's a very powerful point. I completely agree. And at the same time, I have to say that going out of your way and writing cards manually in this day and age is an old-fashioned methodology. But sending it to the son or a daughter or a spouse is far more impactful than giving it to the person, because that makes, I can only imagine if my son comes to me and says, "Daddy, I just got this card and you got this recognition," and it just looks 10 times better than just call him in the office and say, "Great job." So it's amazing that this little powerful technique, but it's a remarkable technique.
Yeah, it's an element of praise, isn't it? That praise is always valued more the more people hear it. And so we praise in public and we correct in private, right? Because it works the opposite way as well. So if somebody messes up in my organization, I don't put them on blast on Slack or email or Facebook or something, right? I bring them in, I say, "Hey, the standards of behavior are this, you did this. Can we talk about why you thought that was appropriate? And what do you think you're going to do in the future when faced with similar circumstances?" That's it. But to praise, the bigger the bullhorn I can get, the more people that can hear me saying that for that person is good. And people are so starved for praise, Mike, that most of the time they don't know what to do with it. Most of the time it's an embarrassing situation. "Oh gosh, shucks, I was just doing my job," or something of that nature is often the response. But we want to get people through that. And we have had to teach people how do you receive praise? How do you receive an award, a gift, recognition, that sort of thing. We have actually taught people how to do that, little format on how to do that, because we are starved for praise when we do good work in this world.
Just one quick comment on this. This is the reality, and people used to, unfortunately, in this world, they used to people criticizing them and receiving less praise. This statistical point that people complain about something 7 times more often that they'll actually reach out and say, "Thank you for the great work." So the opposite is true in a lot of times. People will they need the praise, because that thank you, that appreciation happens so much less. Just somehow naturally people are just gravitate towards a complaint or unhappy comment when something happens versus the praise. So you have to have a conscious effort to
That's
go
exactly
out of your
right.
way to basically say thank you as more times than you would like to, and it builds long-term relationship. The one more comment that I have in my experience, years ago, I learned this. Most people, and again, spending a corporate career, I do real estate now. I've had a great career in technology before that, and then obviously found my passion doing real estate. But in technology world, there was a number one rule, at least that's what I learned. There's a reason why people quit the job or stay in the job. So only number one reason. And it's not about the pay or the bonus or anything else. It's about the relationship with the immediate supervisor or their boss. And if they have a great relationship reinforced by praises and thank you, people are a lot more likely to stay and to be motivated and succeed versus go and look for another job if they feel that relationship is no longer good.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that. And the key point to me is that it has to be authentic. Right? If you have a stack of cards and you have to get those cards done before 5 o'clock that day, and you're sort of scratching your head and saying, "Thank you for being a part of the team, but I don't really have anything to thank you for," that's not good. That's not the point. I have a young lady that works with us, and she really wants praise and appreciation. But for the first 6 months of her job, she really wasn't performing at a level where she was receiving that a lot. And so I sat down with her and said, Here's how you get what you really want. You need to do these three things, and you need to do them really successfully. She now does those things beautifully. And every time she does one, she makes sure to stop by to get a little praise for what she's done well. It's a good relationship between us because I know what she wants. She's asking for it in the right way. She's performing in the right way. But I have to be attuned as the CEO that that person gets treated than another person, that gets treated differently than another person on the team, for sure. Because the CEO has to realize that every single person is an individual. They're not a number. And you have to treat them and you have to be in relationship with them in that way. And if you're in a company of 1,000 people or 28,000 people or something like that, how do you do that? I don't care. But the job is to do that. That's your job to figure out how do you establish as many good relationships as you can impact through your work in your organization. Easy for me. I have 19 people. Right? I know every one of them. I know their spouses. I know the names of their children. I've been to the graduations and the births. I've been to funerals. I know what their pets are. I know where they go on vacation. And I don't do it because I need to. I don't have a spreadsheet sitting here reminding me of that, right? I do it because it's the great privilege of my life to work with people who are on the same journey as I am, that we've consciously said we believe these things and we want to see them true in the world. And that's a great compliment to me that I get to spend time with people of like minds.
That's awesome. That's genuine caring and genuine leadership. Thank you. Now let's dive into the next point, the numbers. So we covered the culture, we covered the people, now the numbers. So isn't that a CFO's job? This is the traditional culture where chief financial officer needs to know the numbers. In reality, CEO needs to know the numbers even more than the CFO. So talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think the CEO's job when it comes to numbers, and CEOs tell me this all the time. I have John over here who's going to do the numbers. He's the best part. So I'm bringing him into this meeting so he can talk numbers. It's not what I'm talking about. Numbers are the things against which we want to be held accountable. They're the scorecard. They're the guidepost on the roadmap. That's what we're talking about. It's the CEO's core function to describe the vision. And the vision has to be described in terms of numbers and metrics and things that we achieve. Managing the reporting on those numbers, managing the planning on those numbers and those kinds of things can exist in other places. The COO, for example, has a lot to say about the numbers, the metrics, how we're going to get there, the mission of the organization. The CFO has a lot to say about, you've set this goal, but I don't know that it's possible under these circumstances. We need to invest money here and that sort of thing. They can have a part of the conversation, but it is the CEO's core function to describe the vision of where he wants the culture and the people to go. And that's what's represented by the numbers. And numbers are not all hard numbers. They're not all top line revenue and bottom line profit, expenses in the middle, and we spend this much on attorneys and this much on marketing and that kind of stuff. It can also very much be, I want to send 500 thank you cards this year. That's a number. That's an important number for himself. I need to make 2 strategic hires this year. Those are numbers. Those are things that can be tracked. And so that's why we really reserve setting the agenda around culture, setting the agenda around people, setting the agenda around numbers for CEOs and organizations.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Yeah, in this life, anywhere you go, you always have numbers. I can't imagine there isn't anything out there without numbers. I guess maybe a feeling or emotion could be without numbers. You can still quantify it. How angry do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10, right? That's
yeah, exactly. Right. And you go to the hospital now and they say, how is your pain on a scale of 1 to 5? And you have to tell them quantifiably, this is how I'm feeling on my pain scale and, that sort of thing. The other thing is that, it communicates to the organization what you find important. So there's no organization in the world that wouldn't communicate, hey, we have a revenue target. We want to do this for sales and revenue and retention target. We have a marketing target. We have a social impressions target. Whatever is important to the organization, the only way that everybody in the organization is going to see your organization through your eyes is to see the dashboard of numbers that you say are important.
Yeah, that's I think the behind the scenes word is dashboard, and the numbers speak themselves. what gets tracked gets done. So if something is tracked, that is important, and that means it's going to get done, or it's going to get driven to the goal.
That's right.
So let's put all those things together, right? So culture, people, numbers, CEO. So what's the difference between good CEO and a great CEO?
Well, as you will not be surprised, Mike, because we know each other, I have a story for that. And I love to be a good storyteller. And the person that taught me the difference between a good leader and a great leader was my 6th grade algebra teacher, Mrs. Madeline Brownlee. And you've heard me talk about her before, of course, but she was this tall lady. She had a beehive hairdo. Not that I'm old enough that she had a beehive, but that she kept that, sort of hairstyle her entire career. She had these polyester pantsuits that she wore all the time. And she always had a little brooch on. It was a butterfly or a bee or an insect or something like that. That was her ensemble. And she was tough as nails. She didn't let anybody get away with anything. And she was the headmistress for my entire school, but she was my 6th grade math teacher, sort of pre-algebra teacher. And the first day of pre-algebra, I came into class and she said, "You're going to be the homework monitor. And you're going to take down records of everybody who did their homework, did it well, or didn't do it at all." And I said, "Oh, great. This is exactly what every 6th or 7th grader wants, is to be held up as the policeman of the homework." But that was the job. And so I did that job until one day I had to mark someone off that didn't do their homework, and that person played on the basketball team and he wasn't able to play that week, and it was big drama, big middle school drama. And I went to her and I said, "I don't want to do this job." And she said, "Do you know why I chose you for that job?" And I said, "No, I have no idea. This makes no sense to me and I don't want to do it. I quit." She said, "I chose you for that job because you know the difference between right and wrong. And that matters in this world." She said, "Let me prove it to you." And she pulled the piece of paper up where I had marked the athlete off. And she said, "Why did you mark yourself off of this list?" And I said, "Because I didn't do the homework." And she did that thing that teachers do, where they pull the glasses down on their nose. And she said, "Right and wrong matter in this world, Mr. Taylor. I'll see you tomorrow." And then I was dismissed, but I didn't quit. I still had the job. She called out of me something that she could see. That's called perception. She perceived something before I could see it in myself. And then she evoked it in a process, evocation, which means to call from within. She called that out of me. And it's one of the great things about myself that I appreciate today is that I do have the ability to determine, to discern between right behavior and wrong behavior for a given situation, for a moral situation, for a strategic situation. That is a gift that I have, but I never would have known it if she didn't call it out of me. The chairman of my board was hired the same day that Jack Welch was hired at GE. They were both lower level sales managers, given small territories, and they flew around. They both climbed the ranks well in the company, and Jack climbed it obviously very well and ended up as the CEO. My chairman, my friend, he left 20 years before that happened, but he said everyone always knew that Jack Welch was going to be the CEO of GE. There was never a question when you were in the room with him that he was going to be the CEO. It just so happened that my chairman and I, we do a one-on-one every month. He was in my office the day that Jack passed away. I mentioned to him, "Did you see where Jack Welch had passed away?" He hadn't laid eyes on Jack for 44 years, and he was immediately in tears because Jack Welch would come up to him and say, "George, you're going to be the best plastics salesman in the entire world if you keep up doing the things that you're doing." This was a contemporary of his. He was 9 months younger than Jack. It wasn't he was 15 years younger. It wasn't his superior telling him this. And Jack was doing that all over the place all the time, praising people, seeing gifts in them and calling them out. And 44 years later, it was emotional enough that my chairman, my friend, felt like he had lost something in the world. That's what great CEOs do. Good CEOs just read my book. Great CEOs put it into practice.
The words of the wise. I really appreciate your sharing and the foundational knowledge as well as the key point, what makes a great CEO. And yes, Jack Welch was a great CEO, and I remember even his books. He was really a great straight shooter. I think really good CEO, straight from the gut. Because it takes that. You have to be. It's part of the core values. It's part of the culture, and I can't imagine very successful CEOs who just become the Enron CEOs of the world, because the culture will either show itself or will disappear. So that makes massive difference. And at the end of the day, you could have great successful companies, and then you could have completely failed companies. But I do have a follow-up question. Why is GE struggling now? Do you know? After Jack left, he left it in great shape. I'm to the day I'm still puzzled. It was a great company, and now Jack left. I don't know what happened, but they've been struggling.
Well, we do know, right? So we know that it's the CEO ignoring culture. So that CEO says, look, we're a conglomerate. Each of our individual companies should act in their own ways. So he did that for several years. It's people. So when he was named, this is Jeff Immelt that I'm talking about, that took over from Jack. There's been another CEO since then. When he left, then all of the three lieutenants who were vying for that job also left. Robert Nardelli went to Home Depot, and I forget the other guys and where they went. But you had a big brain drain. And when a big guy leaves like that, he's going to take really good people with him as well. So there was some of that going on for sure. And then the numbers, it was not an execution-based culture. So no one was really focused on what the numbers were and what they should be and that sort of thing. And then you didn't have the people who could execute onto that because the culture didn't value any of that. The other thing that happened, I think,
you can write a book on that.
You could, yeah.
What happened to GE after Jack Welch?
But I think the other thing is that Jack had built a bit of a cult of personality around him because he was that sort of eminently quotable person, and he related well to people. His successors were not that, but thought that that was part of the job description, that they had to have a little cult of personality. They had to speak on stages. They had to write books. They had to do those kinds of things, all of which are great things if you've done the work around the campfire. And they weren't doing that kind of work, at least as effectively as Jack had been able to do it. Maybe it's an unfair comparison, but I think GE's done now, right? At the end of this year, the breakup has happened and they're all gone.
Yeah, I haven't checked the latest, but I think they are. Yeah, there is. Maybe something will still be left of the GE. Again, don't quote me on this because I'm not sure. Yeah. But it certainly is it's already a shadow of the company what it used to be. And I've seen this with a few other really great companies, kind of American icons. Obviously, GE is one of them. The other one that's kind of dear to my heart is Eastman Kodak. They lost their groove, and they lost the market, and a few other companies have go through this, and it's unfortunate. Especially in big companies, CEOs can make such a big difference. So
it's amazing. With Kodak, a friend of mine was the chief marketing officer there, and he was called into the CEO's office one day and handed a digital camera. And the CEO says, "Look what we developed. This is what's wrong with this company is we're building products that don't use film." That was a cultural issue right there, right? That was a culture not respecting innovation, which Kodak had always done.
Yeah, they developed the digital cameras. This is the shame. They developed the digital camera. I know the history. My sister still works at Eastman Kodak. She's been there for forever. She's a PhD in chemistry. She's been there but the point here is that that fact that Eastman Kodak developed digital camera and then realized that this great innovation is going to compete with a film line, and they didn't want to lose the film line awesome revenues and awesome profits. Instead, they let other companies do it and eat their lunch and basically destroy them. They just chose to be the dinosaur versus the innovator.
Yeah, if they had gone full bore after that with an IP platform patents and trademarks and all that sort of thing. Every iPhone picture today that we took, we could be paying Kodak for it, right? And they didn't understand. They thought they were in the film business, not the photography business. So that's easy for us to analyze, but very, very different. And I'll say one other thing just because it suggests itself to me. I took my wife to the first couple of doctor's visits for the new baby. Worst experience you can imagine. The most joyous time in your life, and you're treated like cattle, prodded and pushed to run through this and that sort of thing. The whole practice is missing the opportunity to make it an experience. And are you going to turn down the ability to pay money for some experience involving your child? No, you'll pay any amount of money. Once they've got me in the door, they could tell me it cost $1 million, and man, we'll figure out a way to pay that, and they could have showers and they could have pictures and experience it. They don't do any of that. It's all a medical thing. It's them visioning their business incorrectly. They're not in the baby delivering business. They're in the baby experience business. And I don't think they see that. So that's another example of a CEO probably not catching the culture of the times very well there.
Yeah, you may want to go back to the shop and ask to speak with a CEO and see if they have their culture right. It is unfortunately, like you said, a lot of businesses they still function, but they don't have the right vision and a mission. And especially with kids, your point is absolutely right. That the parents will do anything and everything for the kids.
Anything, yeah.
And this is the first step of that journey is before the baby is born, but it's part of the process. That's
right.
It's the first very early step, but it's still the same journey. So
yeah, you get me. You do. Well,
thank
Mike,
you kindly
really,
for your wisdom.
Yeah.
All good things must come to an end, and so does this interview. And the question is, how would folks reach to you for consulting, for coaching? And once again, we gotta bring the book, which is available on Amazon and Audible, and I am reading Audible.
Yes, excellent.
Only does 3 things. So what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, our website is trinity-blue.com. That's a consulting company website. We do sort of boot camps where we come in and push and prod and get executive teams recognizing challenges. If they then need help on those challenges, then we offer coaching individually as well. I do all the CEO coaching myself, and then I have a good team around other C-suite members as well, so that we can bring it all into the same level of focus.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for writing the book and sharing it with the world.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Trey.
Thank you for listening to the Big Mike Fund Podcast. To receive your copy of Mike's How to Choose a Smart Real Estate Fund book, head to BigMikeFund.com or visit Amazon and type Mike Zlotnick. Keep listening and keep investing Big Mike style. See you on the next episode.